Om Mahaganapataye Namaha. In this video, I'm going to talk about the electromagnetic intention technology and at least two different ways that you can implement this technology. I'm also going to be discussing the science behind this technology, a little bit of how it works, my experience with it, and in essence, why you want to be using this. So let me first start by defining the electromagnetic intention, and then I'll get into some of the science, and then I'll talk about the application and what's possible with it. So electromagnetic intention is referring to two components, electric and magnetic. Now, according to Joe Dispenza's research, if you're not familiar with Joe Dispenza, I highly recommend his YouTube videos. He's got some books. If you're not familiar with him, a very brief synopsis on Joe Dispenza is he is one who has been able to take the metaphysical, spiritual principles, science concepts, and actually put research and science behind them and bring them into, essentially scientize them so that they are we able to measure them and able to essentially say, define what they are exactly. And so according to his research, thought is electric and emotion is magnetic, and together they create an electromagnetic field. Now the emotion, the magnetic, has an amplitude effect on the thought. So if you can take a thought, and if you understand, I won't go into this video, it's a little bit out of the scope, it's going to take too long, but in short, if you watch my past videos, if you understand particle physics, why thought is so important is because thought is what collapses the wave potential into particles, and that becomes our reality. So your thought, in other words, creates reality, or in the yoga sciences, they say yad bhavam tat bhavati, which means you become as you think. So the thought here, electric, the emotion, magnetic, and the magnetic amplifies the thought. So the idea here is the thought alone is okay, but to make that thought powerful, you want to put an emotion behind it. Now there are a particular style of thought that you want to use and a particular type of emotion you want to use. Now I will get into that in a moment. Now before I do, I will talk about a little bit how the concept of why you're doing this and what is the benefit of doing this. So according to Joe Dispenza's research, and also yoga sciences, quantum physics, neurology, and all these different sciences together are saying that we know, yes, in the observer theory and particle physics, it's the observer who is creating the reality, that a reality is an effect. And the observer, quote unquote, which is their term they use in particle physics, is the cause. Now there's different names for the observer. One is, Dr. Ply talks about, is the mindset, which is essentially your identity. The identity that you have, which is rooted in your mindset, is the observer. So if your identity has certain concepts such as, I can do this, I can't do this, this is impossible, this is possible, I should do this, I should not do this. And like this, all these different concepts, these different pieces of information that you're holding in your subconscious and also in your conscious mind. Usually your conscious mind, though, is just an effect of your subconscious and unconscious, as that information percolates up and filters through your frontal cortex, which is the seat of your identity. Now, this identity, if the concept here is, in order to create something new, you have to create an identity or a neurology that supports that creation. So if you're making, say, $2,000 a month, that is a reflection of your identity. It's about what you think is possible. I can only make $2,000 a month. Making $25,000 a month is outside of your conceptual lexicon at the current moment, and therefore it doesn't reflect, it's not projected out. Where they have the billionaires, their money, it's not because they're lucky, and it's because of the information, in some cases, they were born with, which is a reflection of their karma, which is carried over from a previous lifetime. But if you don't want to go into that and get confused by that, in general, you can say it's their information in their subconscious conscious that is allowed to be projected out as billions of dollars. They have no problem believing in that. So in order to go to that level, that is an identity shift, and more precisely, it is a neurology. It's also a biology as well. This information we're referring to is a genetic information. And so the way you think releases certain chemicals that upregulate and downregulate your genes. In more simplistic terms, they are turning on certain genes or turning off certain genes. So they are changing the information that you are storing in your physical body. And your body over time, through habitual ways of thinking, will condition itself to release these chemicals. For example, if you are in a constant state of stress and worry, you wake up every day, you worry about the day ahead, you get to work and you're stressed out the whole time, you get back and it takes you the whole night and probably some, heavy food or drinking to sort of wind yourself down, and you get back up. And if you do this consistently, your body will become so addicted to that biologically that it will naturally release those chemicals as a result of the neurology that you have essentially baked into your brain. And that becomes your default state. And therefore, you have limited your reality as a result to create or experience certain circumstances and also material things that is related directly to that identity. Now, in this electromagnetic intention, what we are doing here, this is a technology, a very powerful technology for reconditioning your neurology, your biology, and your psychology, and also the quantum field itself. Your electromagnetic means you're amplifying that thought, and through amplitude you can create new synapses, and you can allow, when you think and do certain things, it builds certain circuitry in your brain every time. The problem is, unless they are reinforced, they just fall away, and the ones that you have reinforced through habitual thinking and acting will overpower them and remain the same. And amplitude means when you put in a new thought that is outside of your current architecture you already built, by putting amplification to it, it gives it the power to stick. And then the other old things that have until then been concretized will begin to be what they call be pruned, or they will fall away. And as a result, you will be reconditioning your neurology. Now, electromagnetic intention is a very fast and effective way to do this on all levels. So this is a little bit of why you want to do it. In a nutshell, it is to recondition your entire identity, your entire biology, your entire neurology, biology, and your psychology to align with a certain creation that you want to create. Now, some ways that you can apply this, 2 ways in particular. Now, in the past video, I've talked about this technology before, but I haven't called it as electromagnetic intention. And in this video, I'm going a little bit more in depth into this. One of the ways to use this is by pairing this with Dr. Ply's midbrain tapping technology. Now, I talked in my past video, if you watched, how the very first time that I did this technique, that was the only thing different I had done, and it had been months, sort of a dry spell, of at least weeks. I was in a bit of a rut. And one morning I had this intuition after watching some of Joe Dispenza's stuff and also some of Dr. Ply's things as well. I paired these two together after I had a light bulb flicked on, and within hours I manifested. I was looking for a new place to live, and I had a particular idea and I manifested it in a very miraculous way. And also, just I think hours later, I manifested a $450 raise out of the blue. Haven't gotten a raise in years. I didn't even ask for one. And it just so happened that that raise came in at the very time that I found the place, and ended up being necessary for me to be able to afford to live in this new place comfortably. And this new place was a luxury apartment that I'm in right now in downtown Portland on the waterfront, on a very, I wouldn't say limited, tight budget, but certainly not an outrageous budget where you think manifesting such a place would be possible. And there's more things, like the apartment happened to be named after me, which I didn't find out until after the fact. The floor plan is named after my last name, and all kinds of things that was just incredible. And all I did was this electromagnetic intention with the midbrain tapping technology. So I will quickly go into that now. So midbrain tapping technology, if you're not familiar with it, I will put a link underneath this video where you can go and watch Dr. Ply explain it and receive initiation into it. In essence, this is a technology that uses reflexology points. Now, reflexology has been researched by Japanese researchers in a university in Japan, which is the idea that you can stimulate a certain area on your body, certain subtle nervous points that are connected to seemingly disconnected, for example, your foot and your brain. They were able to find that by stimulating certain areas of your foot, that certain parts of the brain would become active. And this seems to be unlikely in modern science. However, they were able to establish this is true. This is the whole idea behind acupuncture as well. Reflexology, stimulating these certain energy centers, these certain subtle nervous points to stimulate certain areas. Now, midbrain tapping, there are a series of points that run starting between your two eyebrows here, in a vertical line all the way up to the very top center of your head. And by using your right ring finger or right pinky finger, and your fingers, remember, also have subtle nervous points as well, and there's a reason that you use the particular hand and the particular fingers. Dr. Ply has recommended right ring finger or right pinky finger. I sometimes use both. And what you do is you tap out a condensed line as opposed to jumping like this. You'll just simply close your eyes. You pull your focus first in between your two eyebrows and focus all of your attentional energy there. And at that point, you begin tapping at that space, and then you tap all the way up to the top center of your head. That's step one. Step two is you feel that line that you just tapped out, and you associate that line with the electric thought. Now, when you're tapping this out, what is happening is this part of your head corresponds to your midbrain. And now your midbrain is the seat of your subconscious, and according to the yogis, it's the seat of your third eye, which your pineal gland actually is an eye. It has rods, cones, retina, and happens to be wired into the occipital lobe, which is the area of the brain associated with vision. So for all intents and purposes, it is an actual third eye. And they say by putting a thought in this particular part of your brain, which is the seat of your soul as well, you can manifest that thought into three-dimensional reality. So by doing this, you are activating and opening the midbrain. That line is the midbrain itself. And you're going to associate that line with the electric thought in a present tense style. What you're doing with the present tense and the emotion that we're going to pair with this, which is that of gratitude, is you are tricking your brain to believe or to act as if that thought has already happened. Now, this is born out of a study conducted by Harvard. When they were studying, and there are more studies, this one in particular is the most prominent. They had a study where part of the study they were studying pianists. Now, the first part of the study they were studying the pianist's brain when they are physically playing the piano. The second part of the study they were studying the pianist's brain when they had the pianist imagine that they were playing the piano. What they found was the energetic signature in the brain was identical from physically playing the piano to imagining. In other words, the conclusion that they found was the brain is not able to differentiate between external stimulated reality versus an internally simulated reality. To the brain, it is one and the same. Now, by tricking the brain, and I say trick very lightly, it's just a word to help drive the point home. By tricking the brain, what you are doing is you are building the neurology of that new identity ahead of time. You are engineering that identity by manually engineering the neurology. What do I mean manually engineering? As opposed to you actually having the external experience of being a billionaire, which is not happening at this time. Say you're making $2,000, you're going to have to simulate that until you can bring the external reality or actualize the external reality. So the simulation is a process to do that. Now, the electric thought is in present tense, and the emotion is that of gratitude. Now, gratitude is the emotion of reception. When you're grateful, that signals your neurology that the present tense thought has already happened. Because whenever you feel grateful, it's after it's already happened. And so step number one is tapping out that line. Step two is associating that line. Your attentional energy on that line and the thought is one and the same. So the line and the thought become one. You think the thought as that line. And the second part of this is the emotion. Now that the line is associated with the thought, the emotion also of gratitude is associated with thought. So you allow yourself to feel. The emotion part of it is not intellectual. It is a feeling. And you can bring a small smile to your face, and what you want to do over time and through practice, what I have found, is it becomes super easy to pull those emotions up at the drop of a dime. In fact, it gets to the point whenever you think that thought, the emotion is already there. You don't even have to try anymore. I am making $9,000 a month. And when you do that over and over and over again, as soon as you even think that thought, the emotion is there because why? Because you have trained, you have conditioned your body to that thought. Whenever you hear that thought or think that thought, it automatically triggers a chemical response. This reminds me of the Pavlov, I think it was a Pavlov study. When there was a famous study with a dog. What they did was they had a dog in a room, and before they fed him, they had an automatic dispenser where the food would come down and populate this bowl. And what they would do is they would ring this bell, and then they would release the food. And after a while, what they did was they would just ring the bell, and they were able to produce the same effect. The dog would start slobbering, and essentially the chemical response on all this was the same because they were able to essentially trick the dog or trick the biology or condition it in such a way that the bell alone acted as a trigger to create the whole experience, the simulated experience. And like this, you're doing the same thing with this midbrain tapping and the emotion and the electric thought. Now, this electromagnetic intention can also be packaged together as one intention. Once you get to the level when you can think that thought and the emotion is already there, and they become merged, you can take that and plug that into a more extended meditation practice or a chanting practice. For example, a very simple way to do this is start your day every morning, wake up enough in advance so you have enough of a buffer so that all that you have to do is wake up, take a shower, put on fresh clothes, and then sit down. Or you can also lay down as well. What I recommend is you wake up, shower, put on fresh clothes, and there's a science behind all this as well that I'm not going to get into in this video. I have alluded to it in the past, the science of water, the science of hydrogen, the science of space technology with your clothes. Just take it for granted for the purpose of this video. There is a science of why you're doing this. It's not arbitrary. Now, after you do this, you want to sit down, and if you have a mala, such as this is a mala, you want to chant 100 times, or say you do 1 to 3 malas, or just chant for say 10 to 15 minutes. Now when you're chanting, while it is a mechanical process, you want to focus your energy, focus your mind into the chant. Focus on the syllables. Don't chant and then while you're thinking about what you're going to do for the rest of the day, or what you have to do, you want to pull your attention into the chant, so that you can focus it to imprint into your subconscious and unconscious mind. You are writing those sounds deep into your mind. Now, after you do that, then you go and you plant this electromagnetic intention. Because what happens is, when you're chanting, you are subtilizing your mind, and the more subtle your mind becomes, the more powerful it becomes. In addition to that, you're creating a certain resonance or harmonics, or a certain geometry in your brain. We can measure this on fMRI. When Dr. Pillai was measuring certain sounds or mantras on an fMRI machine, they are finding that certain mantras were activating the brain. So these sound waves are not arbitrary either. It's not a spiritual metaphysical concept. When you're chanting the sounds, your brain is responding, and these particular sounds or mantras have extraordinarily positive, empowering effects on your brain by creating extraordinarily powerful neurology. So the idea here is, after chanting the mantra, you have prepped and primed your brain to become in a very powerful state. You have amplified your brain, in essence, ahead of time. And so when you plant the electromagnetic intention, your brain is already receptive. It's like a fertile soil. And then you go through the process of planting this intention. And if you do this in the morning, you do your chanting, or it can be a meditation practice as well, and at the end you plant your electromagnetic intention. Throughout the day, frequently, at least once an hour, or as often as you can remember, do this midbrain tapping aspect of the electromagnetic intention. And then, at the end of the day, just like in the morning, give yourself about a 15-minute buffer, at least. Of course, the longer you do, the more benefits you can get. But at least give yourself 10 to 15 minutes to do another practice of chanting or meditation. And again, do your electromagnetic intention. And do this just before you go to bed. There is a reason you do this just before you go to bed as well. Just take it for granted. It's a very, very powerful way to do this. Just after you wake up and just before you go to bed. And all in between. And this collectively together I call as a cycle of power. Now, I highly recommend you give this a try and experiment with this technology. It's very, very simple. Even if you just do the electromagnetic attention, if you're able to take that to the next level and pair it with the midbrain tapping, that's great. If you can take that to the next level and do a morning chanting, that's fantastic. The next level, do it throughout the day which accounts for the majority of your time and therefore the most powerful, potentially life-transforming time. And again, if you can do it to also at the evening and take it to that level as well, that's fantastic. The more that you do, the better. I will say an offer to you is give yourself flexibility. And if you're going to do the morning and evening, well, I just said give yourself flexibility, but I mean that is make it dynamic. So just try to implement what you can. If it comes to a point where you're trying to do too much and it has more of a negative effect, then it's not worth it. But I will say if you can do it, definitely go for it. And if you're someone who just can't take it anymore, you will definitely go for it. With the morning and the evening one, if you can, do it at the exact same time. So say 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. every night, I do my practice. 6 a.m. in the morning, every morning, it's without question, unless I have an emergency. This is a time, and there's a reason also, a science behind that as well, which is tied into this conditioning of your body being on an autopilot that will naturally release the chemicals and prepare your mind and body to be in a meditative zone if you do this over and over again. And also by doing it in the morning, you are changing your default state for the entire day. So you'll find the in-between time much easier to stick with the electromagnetic intention and also a mantra that you may be working with. Because after all, how you choose to guide your consciousness is how and what you're going to create. Your consciousness is the substance or the energy, the blueprint, the architecture behind the reality you're experiencing. So guiding your consciousness is everything. Now, if you have any questions, I did cover a lot, and I was a little bit all over the place. Please leave any comments, questions, or feedback or requests underneath this video. If you like this video, please click the like button and also share it with others who you think would find this information valuable too. As always, if you'd like to be notified for future videos, please click subscribe and the bell notification. God bless.